I would see it more, maybe I'm wrong, we're just discussing this part, but I would see that aspect. I would think, when we would turn over our database, I would think that we would have, because you have to kind of, verify ahead of time, when we send out the email verifications and the ballots and that, we'd have to have something in there that says right up front, do you want to get it by email or do you want to get it by paper? Sort of thing. So that when we would send something to survey and ballots, they would, if say, I said, as an example, I said, you could use my email address. Send it to me that way. Well, I get their information. For some reason I turn around and say, I think I would have preferred paper. And I call them. And they would send it paper.
The other question I've got, the absent data in the database. Do we not know where to send all of the statements and bills for the annual dues?
Well, it's done through the mail currently, and having the emails for everybody.
Isn't it the same addresses?
Not the email addresses, and their physical addresses are different. The physical address is where it's mailed. The email address, we don't have email addresses.
Okay, so the absence in the database is purely email addresses?
Yes.
Which are not a requirement to live here?
Correct.
Okay.
No, it's, I think what you're talking about are the lot numbers.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing with the database now is just ensuring that the lot number goes to the appropriate individual, if you will, that matches up. But that doesn't have anything to do with it, just your regular mail out of ballots, because that goes to the property address. So we're just inputting the lot numbers so that all the information is in there.
It would seem to me that the ballot would go to who's paying the bill, as it were.
Well, the ballot goes to the homeowner who owns the
Who's
home.
paying the dues, the annual dues.
Yes.
But the ballot goes to the address that the dues statement invoice goes to.
But for the purposes of this, the lot number, if someone were to vote online, from my understanding, and you, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I vote online, the lot number is used as a verification that I am who I say I am.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure before this even is considered that we have all the correct lot numbers tied to the correct lot owner.
But
if you
people will always, until something drastic happens, have the opportunity to vote by paper.
Yes.
regardless
Yes.
of
Correct.
electronic.
Well, per 720, we would still have to mail out the ballots.
Yeah.
This would just be an option for someone if they
Thank
wanted
you.
to.
Ed, if you'd like to read all of the information on that, 72317 is the section that deals with the state requirements and how they have electronic voting, what they require.
Skip, I appreciate your work that you did in putting that together. Thank you. All right, so there's nothing to move to Thursday on that one. The next item is Becker and Polygraph. B&P, Becker and Polyakoff, approval of retainer funds for 2016. What this is it's $200 as a retainer fund, and paying the $200, what that does for us is it reduces their hourly rate of $425 to $375. We get the legal updates, the newsletters, and the annual mail-outs with proxies. They review our annual mail-outs and the proxies to ensure that everything is done accordingly. So that's what we get by paying the $200 retainer fee. So I make a motion for discussion to approve the $200 retainer fee for Becker and Polyakoff for 2016.
A second.
Discussion? Make a motion. Make a motion to move this to Thursday. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, got that. On the last item, item A, did we table that or just no action?
There's no action.
Okay.
But
So you
For
withdrew the
now.
motion?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
just continue.
Just continue getting the lot numbers in the database shored up, and then we
I'll
can come
coordinate
back.
with those folks.
Yes. The next one are the insurance renewals. There's not necessarily any action to take on this at the moment with regards to choosing The insurance, April went out and spoke to Willis Insurance, who is the current carrier, Jay Newman, who is our previous carrier, Dryer Insurance and the Cone Company. The renewals for our insurance is due in January, February. We need about a month to get the underwriting in order, so she has not heard back. Jay Newman is a little gun shy at the moment with working with Holley by the Sea, given his past experience, so he's not replied with a definitive yes or no. Willis Insurance has not gotten us the quote yet. The individual who is working there, I think, has left, and so there's a new representative that's working that will give us the information. Dryer Insurance is sending a quote, and Matt Cone, or the Cone Company, has not replied. So this isn't necessarily, again, an action that we're taking today. It's just to let everyone know that we are getting the quotes for the insurance so that we can then approve the company. So are there any questions?
As long as we get the tail end insurance,
Yeah.
that carries over.
The tail coverage?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The next item is the structural engineer.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'm Nancy Doherty, 7122 Stillwater. I need to understand on the insurance, it's my fault because I'm not up on all of this, but is one of the companies you mentioned the one we have currently?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not challenging anything at all, I just wanted to understand what was, so one of them's the one we have now, and one of them's the one we had before?
Yes, and then two other companies.
And two other companies?
Yes.
Is there any problem with, excuse me, the one that we had now?
Not that I'm aware of, but she's just getting quotes to ensure that we're getting the best deal with regards to this.
Okay, I was under the understanding that we didn't have everything insured. Has that been changed?
As far as I know, we're insured appropriately.
Okay, like the outbuildings and the whatever. I just was under the impression that those were not insured under the current policy.
Incorrect. They are insured.
They are
They
insured.
have to be insured.
Every building on the property is
Correct.
insured and has been?
Yes. I think what you're referring to is back when there was a legal issue going on and there was a gap in coverage, but it wasn't for the buildings and facilities, it was for something else. You know, it was
Oh,
for.
no, I know what you're talking about. No, I know about that too.
No, our structures.
Okay, I was under the impression that the policy that we had in the past, before this current one, covered more things, more buildings than what this current one does.
Now, as far as I know, all the buildings and structures are insured.
The shelters,
If it's a structure, yes, like a building. Now, I don't know if the RV pads are insured, if that's what you're talking about. but
no, the
structures. Pavilions?
pavilions.
Yes, as far as I know, all structures are insured.
If you know something to the contrary, let us know, and
Well,
we'll be sure to
I
investigate.
don't know,
but
I don't know it for a
you know,
fact, I just have heard it, you know, so you hate to do that, you know, to even bring it up, because I don't have no substantiation whatever for it. But I just wanted, if it were true, I have a little concern about it, if it's not true, great, you know, yeah, that's all. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. The next item, the structural engineer quotes for recreation center. In order to discuss this, I'll make a motion to move forward with selecting a company for remodeling the recreation center.
I second.
There were three companies that came and did a walkthrough of the property. Rod and I were accompanied ECM, Engineering and Construction Management Company, and also BCEI, BECI, also came out and did a walkthrough, and we went through and provided them what we were looking at as far as updating the facility, just to make certain that everyone is clear, the footprint of the facility itself would not change. The actual outline of the building, it would just be remodeling it to include, you know, kind of maybe expanding the not the rec center, expanding the gym, utilizing that space in there better, you know, restructuring the offices, you know, maybe changing the entrance, it's things like that. So there were 3 companies that came. These are their proposals for ECM. They're an all-inclusive company, so their cost with their preliminary came back as a little bit higher than the other 2 companies simply because they would do everything in-house. So that's what we will be discussing tonight. I'll briefly just go through, does the board want me to go through each company? Since we have the information, do you want me to list? Okay. So the first one is ECMI, Engineering and Construction Management Company. They came out, they have different phases with regards to what they would do. The first phase would be the professional and architectural services, existing condition and inspections and engineering report. They would perform your architectural code analysis and preparations of new floor plans and new entry elevations. They would perform their civil, structural, mechanical, plumbing, engineering services and prepare associated construction documents to bid the project by qualified contractors. They would issue invitation to bidders associated with the new plans to renovate the existing buildings in accordance with plans and specifications. They would solicit bids from 3 qualified general contractors to perform the required scope of work outlined in our report and bid package. They would assist the board in the selection of the contractor and award the contract. Their professional construction management services would include attending the pre-construction meeting with selected contractor and owner to answer questions and establish schedule and pay applications. They will designate a construction manager to oversee the construction progress, minimum 3 hours, 3 days a week for the duration of the construction. Also, the project engineer architect shall perform 1 site visit per week and meet with the construction manager and general contractor to review the project progress and produce inspection reports. The project engineer and construction manager will be available to meet with the board and their representatives and general contractor during the site visits. They would review each pay application for accuracy and % work completed versus requested funds for each schedule of value line item. Upon completion of all construction activities, CDA ECM will issue a letter of compliance to the board and Santa Rosa County Building Department to close out the project. Their fees for phase 1, the professional architect and engineering services, is $40,000. Phase 2, professional construction management services, is $20,000 for a total of $60,000. They would issue a $1 million liability insurance certificate to Holley by the Sea, both CDA and ECMI, for a total of $2 million. Their sister company, Blue Danube Contracting, will gladly submit to the board for consideration a construction bid for the desired renovations and repairs. If BDC was selected as the construction firm, then the phase 2 fee for contract administration and construction management inspections during the renovation process would be waived, so that's the $20,000. And that's what they would do. And this would also include engineer plans to meet the accessibility and code compliance issues for the center. And that's for all of them. BECI, the owner is, let's see, this came from John, I believe his name is. Jimmy Fell is his name. So he outlines his conceptual design services, meeting with the client to discuss the history of the property, renovation desires regarding interior and limited exterior areas of the main building, review original drawings and any drawing modifications, perform site visit to document existing conditions, create 2 separate conceptual drawings. The first conceptual design would include drawings related to an overall site plan, a floor plan with references to limited conceptual partial elevations for modifying the interior, main entry lobby, front offices, locker rooms, men and women, west glass enclosed room, exercise and weight rooms, and main meeting kitchen area. A second conceptual design shall include all items listed above, along with proposed renovations related to the exterior and specifically adding a new entrance at the west elevation parking lot, along with conceptual renovations to modernize the exterior of the main building. What he's talking about there would be adding an entrance to the west where the exit is right now. Meeting with the client to present conceptual designs. They provide their qualifications, and if anybody wants to review that, you're more than welcome to do so after the meeting. The terms, the conceptual design services described here would be performed for the sum of $16,000, which includes all reimbursable expenses. A fully executed copy of the proposal would be required prior to scheduling any services, and a retainer fee in the amount of $500. The next one is RJH and Associates, Building Envelope Consultants and Structural Engineers. They will review drawing for the building with respect to the proposed change locations to include any original drawings and any modifications that have been previously made to the proposed locations. They will meet with the client on site to discuss in detail the specifications of the planned and proposed building restoration to include modifications to the interior as well as exterior locations as discussed. Conceptual design will include computer-aided design drafting related to the overall site plan and floor plans of the buildings with reference to the conceptual or partial elevations that modify the interior, wall locations, room sizes, etc., as well as exterior elevations as required by the conceptual design. Based on the site visit, it is our understanding that these areas will include the following: the interior main entryway and front offices, men's and women's locker rooms on the east side of the main building, exercise room, kitchen and meeting area facing the pool, and office and children's area rooms on the west side of the buildings, conceptual handicap modification to the pool bathroom area, exterior new entrance along the east side adjacent to the parking lot, and conceptual renovations regarding the exterior elevations to the areas. The work described for the conceptual design for building restoration will be performed for the lump sum of $14,950. Should they be asked to provide additional services above and beyond what is included, the services will be performed under the normal hourly services. So again, the reason we went out and to have these preliminary bids come in was to provide the board with engineered plans. Again, that would meet the accessibility and code compliance and to modernize the facility. This building was built in 1972, and it's a nice building, but I do think that it could be redesigned and modernized to, first and foremost, to be accessible to all members. You know, we have a various demographic we have with regards to our members. And so because each member, homeowner, lot owner, is required to pay an assessment, in my opinion, and I believe the boards as well, everyone should have accessibility to the building. It should be easily accessible to all. So it's just taking what we have and improving on it, if you will. So.
Now, in looking at these, it looks like of the three packages that have been delivered to us, that there are two distinct differences in the packages. One package is for actual construction drawings, and the other package for the other two bidders are for just napkin drawings of what it should look like. To me, those aren't necessarily going to be something we could get bids from. We would require additional work to be able to get to that point where with the first company, that is a more complete package that you could actually take to a contractor and say, okay, give me a price.
And that's why theirs is a little higher, or I would say a lot.
Well, when you're paying for a ton more work.
Yes.
The other is merely conceptual.
Yeah, it's just pretty pictures. This is what we want to sell to
This is
the
what we
members.
could do. If you approve, then we move forward with all the other work that has to be done.
Well, what is our intent in this? Are we just conceptualizing this project so that we can sell it to the membership and a future board can build it? Or are we trying to get to a point where, you know, next year sometime we're breaking ground to do something?
I would like to see us eventually approve a company who can then present us the plans, we can select the plans, and we can move forward with breaking ground. You know, as quickly as possible. I'm not rushing it, not starting like next January or something, but making steady progress toward Because my fear is if we defer and defer and defer, then this is what we will have indefinitely.
So do we need kind of piggybacking on Kevin a little bit? So is our first step the concept, or is our first step beyond the concept?
Well, I think the first step would be approving one of these companies to do the designs, and then we can move forward from there.
Then you're saying designs, you're not meaning construction drawings that are biddable, but just concepts.
Well, if we go with the two latter, then that would just be conceptual drawings. And then we would choose which ones we want, which ones we like, modifications would take place, and then we would go to the next, which would be your construction. For the first one, it would be the conceptual drawings to include the constructional drawings that would be more involved with what we would be presented with preliminary or initially to decide.
Because I like the thoroughness of the first one, but if the first one did just the amount of work that the other two were doing, what would they charge just to do the conceptual part of that? Do we know?
No, I don't know.
Or would they even do that?
I can find out. I mean, April will be here, but we can find out by Thursday, I'm sure. Is that what you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, that way we're comparing all three equal packages for equal amount of work. And right now, we've got two bids for concept and one for construction, construction
Which
drawings.
includes the concept.
Yes.
Yeah,
But it's a lot more thorough package.
yeah, it's a lot more thorough package, but at the same time, I think it's almost shooting ahead too much.
Well, I mean, at some point, we're gonna have to sell this to membership.
Right.
It's either through special assessment or through, money that we've got in capital improvement, if there's enough. But until we get to a point where we know how much money it's gonna cost, we don't know which avenues it's being able to take.
When they're doing the design, would
Yeah.
the designs also include any of the updating us on code?
They would, as far as accessibility and code compliance. There is one, as long as we don't, and you were there, so correct me if I get this wrong. From my understanding, as long as we don't expand the footprint, and we leave the shape, the outline, if you will, as far as like the fire suppressant,
Right.
we would not have to come up to code.
Okay.
Now, if we blow out a wall, and we make it bigger, then we do. And each person that we spoke to said that is astronomical with regards to cost.
Yes, it is.
But other codes we can be brought up to code in other areas without hitting the sky, if you will.
So is it possible in the design, even in the design phase, you might know this from your other work, is it possible in the design phase that becomes a what if?
What do you mean if it
I mean,
becomes a what if?
When they presented design to us and ideas to us, that they might tell us if that would involve any kind of the code changes that we would need to incorporate later.
Well, of course, we have a couple of different codes we're talking about. One being compliance for disability, which is one thing we told all of them to consider. The fire code, that seems to rear its head every time a project like this is presented. However, if what you're doing, which essentially what we're talking about, is rearranging the interior space on the footprint within the building, it's grandfathered in, and we would not have to upgrade fire suppression system. And once we were to, as she said, if we were to break through a wall and all of a sudden expand in an exterior manner, then that would be the case.
Yeah, and I guess my, for lack of a better term, if they design something that came to play, that they saw that, they kind of, say went crazy and said this would be an idea to put forward to you, for us to know if it changes any kind of coding. Does that make sense?
I don't
I don't really
understand
follow.
the question.
No, okay. I'm I'm just thinking in that, okay, they give us kind of what we're looking at. But if they decide also that they might want to add in something pie in the sky that you might want to consider, if it changes anything, that would require.
If they come up with something different
They
than
come up
what.
with
So if we, for example, if we approve ECL, they come up with designs, we approve it, we move forward, and then halfway through the project, they say they want to add something.
No, I was just thinking in the design itself, if they presented something that may be.
Well, if we ask them to, if we said to them, we want you to include in your conceptual designs and cost to make us code compliant with regards to the fire suppressant system, then I imagine they would do that and provide us what the final cost would be. But we've not asked them. Am I not understanding what you're?
We're trying to avoid that.
Right, right.
So we're not asking, pretty
Yeah.
much we're making basic, this is what we want, we don't want them to add anything extra on.
And I'm only saying if they added something extra
Well,
on.
they couldn't expand, they couldn't blow out a wall and expand this facility without our approval.
Right, right.
And we would not, you know, Rod and I, or we're never thinking about making it bigger.
Yeah, no,
but
the only thing
rather utilizing the
the only
space
thing I was
better.
thinking in my head was, in that same context, in the design itself, if they determined that, yeah, we could do this, but maybe this would be even better.
They could present that to us, but then that would be a board decision to come before the board and say, you know,
No,
this is
I
what we
know that.
approved, but they think we should do this because it would be better, and here's the cost.
Yeah.
And then we would have to say yes or no to that.
No, I'm okay.
Going back to the bids, or the bids for the work here, I would almost prefer that instead of making the other one, the first one less conceptual, make the other two more complete to a construction bidding process, so that we can actually put hard numbers to something.
I think that I will definitely ask April to do that. It might be difficult only because they're more of a architectural firm where they would have to actually go out for that, the
Well, I mean, if they're an
ECI,
architectural firm, I
ECL.
mean, they can do architect, they can, you know,
do
estimate their
the-
architectural drawings for
and the
doing
cost.
the construction
Okay.
drawings.
Because ECM is a, you know, kind of an all-encompassing firm, so now it's easier, but
Yeah, I
yes.
mean, they know how to create a construction set of documents.
So why don't we try to do both before Thursday? And then we can just discuss what we have.
Because otherwise, we're just gonna end up with a pretty picture with a, you know, this is what we like for Christmas situation. Yeah.
So go to VECI, go with the other two companies and ask them to provide what ECM provided.
Yeah, not necessarily the construction management portion of it, but the up through construction drawing phase of it, which would be their phase one, basically.
Okay, so are we moving this to Thursday?
Yes. If we can get the information by then.
Howard Wilson, 1894 Commodore. Has the risk been assessed based on what this building was built with back in 1972 of finding an environmental concern once they start tearing things apart?
Do you mean like asbestos?
Exactly,
Asbestos?
because that, if they find anything, it could be extremely expensive.
I can ask, do you recall them talking about that? I don't recall anything about asbestos, right?
With the roof repair, they were all up in the roof area, and if there was asbestos, they would have noted it.
Yeah, I mean, it could be an underfloorment in the floor, it can be in the walls, it can be anywhere. So just
Yeah.
if we ask the question, assess the risk.
Thank you.
John Longman, 2914 BJ Boulevard. I heard something that concerned me a little bit. I was involved in a construction project a number of years back where we did not physically change the footprint of the building. That does not necessarily mean that fire suppression won't come into play. It depends on what they do internally and how that affects entrances, egress, all that kind of stuff. But you may still end up with some fire suppression problems.
Well, we did ask, and we were very specific about that. I can check again.
I would ask again, because I can tell you personally, I was involved in a project that cost us $40,000 more than what we thought we were gonna pay. we did not change the physical footprint of the building. Just a comment.
What did y'all change just that triggered that?
We actually built another room within the facilities. In other words, we took some empty space and made it, basically we made it into a design lab.
So instead of modifying an existing room, you created a new room within another room.
But it's still the same, moving walls and building walls where there weren't walls and that kind of stuff. I'm just saying to you that I don't know if it would happen, but I'd be very careful to make sure
That's a good
that you
county question.
understand that.
Thank you.
Richard R., 6827 Liberty Street. The two companies that are offering what I would call a concept proposal, and then the one that is the concept plus the actual drawings. I'm walking in on this like the middle, but the thing that interests me, each company is going to come up with a totally different use of the building, unless you tell them specifically what you're doing.
Yeah, and we did, that we walked through with the first two companies, the entire facility, and, you know, even back here, and even went to the beach house with ECMI or ECM, and, so there was a very thorough walkthrough where both Ron and I discussed some of the modifications we'd like to see, and they just looked at the space, and they had some ideas as well. You could take this space and use it for this, and, just redesigned it that way. So they did base their proposals on what we were wanting with regards to the modifications.
My concern is each one's going to come up, in other words, they may take this room and cut off a little bit and do something, the other one will do something else. I'm thinking you really want, unless you absolutely know what you want, you need to get the concept down before you do any of the actual drawings. It's a good idea if they're going to do it.
So you like the latter two where they are providing the concept, that it gives us the ability to kind of nail down what it is we're wanting before we go further?
Sure. And that, I'm thinking you should do that for all three. Get somebody, your group to approve, the board and the members to approve that, okay, that's what we want. Then you go out and get the other things, and then your possibility of it changing the fire code, that'll probably come up by that time.
One of the things that will happen is I have a background in construction, and both commercial and residential. And one of the things that will happen is regardless of which one, if we get a full set of drawings, before we get to that stage in the development, there'll be like 3 or 4 different revisions of preliminary drawings that are going to be included in that base contract price. So, as far as that, it won't be the entire building drawn out exactly like it needs to be, but we'll get preliminary floor plans, maybe an elevation or 2 out of it while they're in the conceptual stage. Once we agree to that, then they would move to the final construction drawing stage.
Each one of them would get a preliminary and a final?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just concerned, in my concept of doing this type of thing, if I was gonna change this building, I would have one idea and somebody else would have absolutely.
Yeah, obviously they're gonna give, we're gonna have ideas, they're gonna have ideas, and it's all gonna get melded together onto a piece of paper, and they're gonna say, what do you think about this? And then we're gonna have to meet and say, yeah, we like this, but can you make this bigger, make that smaller? And it'll be a give and take, and generally a contract will allow 1 or 2 rounds of modifications for the given price.
And will contractor A be present with B and C when they're doing that, where you meld their concepts together?
Well, generally, each company is going to work independently, and, company B is not going to want to use company A's design, because company A will sue them. So,
You have to hire all 3 of them.
yeah.
That's
For that.
So we're looking for, independent thought is not a bad thing, to come from 3 different sources.
Right.
One may have an idea that the other ones don't.
You have to some point meld them together, but I'm thinking it's better to have 3 designs than one.
Well, yeah, you're paying for 3 designs then. 3 designs. Where if we just go with one company, we may go through 2 or 3 revisions, but it's still going to be.
Okay, the revisions have to come.
Yes.
And I know that the 2 companies we spoke with, they did state that they could present, like 3 different designs, if you will, that go from, your minimum cost to your most expensive and then in the middle. And so, you know, they could present different designs with ideas and then they can be modified. And this would be, you know, if this moves forward, we would have an open board meeting and workshops to allow members and of course the board to review these. So this would not be something that would be done, this would all be done in the open to allow input for whatever designs they come up with, if we go forward.
Okay, what I'm looking for is multiple designs without you all having to come up with one.
Yeah, that's fine for a house when it's, you know, a fairly standard plan and they're just changing a few things, but for a commercial structure, that's impractical.
Thank you.
Make a motion, we move this to Thursday.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, just to make sure I clarify, we'll ask the two ladder companies to provide the same as ECM. We'll check on the asbestos, the fire suppressant, and the fire suppressant system.
It's easy for you to say.
Having a hard time speaking tonight. Okay. All right, the next item, April wanted us to review, just because we've been reviewing policies and programs in general. So this is for review. It's up to the board as to what to do with this, or with these programs. So most of the programs at Holley by the Sea are on an 80-20. So say the karate class, that instructor takes 80%, gives 20% of whatever it is he makes to the association. Okay, that is not the case with Ms. Hamilton, who's an instructor, the swim team, and the youth program. Now the youth program is a little different than the first two mentioned in that it's pretty much self-funded. And the two programs, the Fun Factory and what was the other ones again? The Fun Factory and Parents Night Out is no longer a part of that program. So it is just the youth program, which does, like I said, does pay for itself. Hamilton's class has the board, a previous board set what her class rates would be, so she can't change them. We have, we're at a loss with regards to that class. In other words, we lose money. As far as the swim team, we also lose money with that. So the options are, you know, we can bring the swim class and Hamilton and the youth program, if desired, to an 80-20 split. Okay. We can leave it as is. If it's an 80-20 split, then of course they would need to provide, you know, their insurance and as the other programs do. But it's really, or we can just leave them as they are. And so this is just, you know, information with regards to where all the programs are, and these three are the only ones who do not fit into that 80-20. If nothing else, I would just like to see Hamilton be able to set her own rates, because I'm not really sure why a previous board would decide how much a class should cost, because whether she has 3 people or 5 people or 100 people, you know, she needs to be able to set, and that might fix her being in the negative, if she's able to set her own, you know, her own rates, and that is part of the reason why we are in a negative with that.
What does Hamilton, what class is that?
It's I want to say yoga. It's an exercise fitness class.
Real quick, is it a swim team or a learn to swim class?
It's a swim team.
Okay.
And she doesn't she also do swim instruction?
I think in the summer she does.
Okay.
What is she?
Now the difference between her and Hamilton is she's a paid employee for those hours that the swim team is here. So there's a little bit of difference there as well.
Same person but different.
No, it's two different people. The swim team is led by a different individual than Hamilton Pond, I believe the first name is.
So do we have a motion on this? Or are we just reviewing this for discussion?
Well, it's being reviewed for discussion, and, you know, again, I think the options are we take all programs to an 80-20 so that it's standard across the board, or we leave it as is, or we leave the youth program as is because that funds itself, and we require the swim team program and the instructor, the Hans fitness program to be 80-20. It's up to the board, what it is we would like to do with this, or we just simply leave them as they are.
I don't see how these are related. I see Ms. Hamilton's should be an 80-20, and I agree with all of the other programs are. And if a previous board set her rate, she should be able to set her own rate, just that we get our 20%. Now the swim team, I don't see that as the same animal, because it's a paid employee. Where does the income come in? This is not associated with the high school swim team, correct?
Yes, no, it's not.
We have our own swim team.
She was looking at programs because this is a program that's offered, just as Hamilton's is. So she was just pulling all the data for all the programs, and these three, while they're not identical, they don't fall under the same 80-20 that the other programs.
So the kids pay, or the parents pay for the kids to be in this program, and that's where the income comes from for this?
Yes. So for the swimmers, they would pay, for example, the income that was generated from January 1st, 2015 to March 31st was $22,808. From April 1st to October 31st was $6,863. So from January to October, the program generated $9,671. The HR cost was well over that. So that would have been a loss that we had. So what was generated for that didn't even begin to pay for the costs associated.
But it looks to me like part of this was money that we had to pay FS. Part of this calculation includes money that we had to pay FSR for keeping that employee. Is that correct?
Yeah, she's an employee, so the FSR would have been, to pay her through FSR, and then through simple HR, that's the cost that we paid her. So that's just the total cost that she was paid, her salary, if you will.
Right. But what I'm getting at is that this figure includes the penalty that we had to pay FSR.
No, I don't. This is just her pay.
Huh?
This is just her pay, from my understanding. I think that's a separate issue we can check, but from my understanding, this is just simply what she's made.
My question would be, what are her responsibilities over Ms. Hamilton's? Because it seems to me that with the swim team and everything else, she has a little more responsibility to the center than Ms. Hamilton does, because Ms. Hamilton can come in and teach her class and leave. But is the other person here more, what are her responsibilities during the day?
From my understanding, this is all she does.
Okay.
So she doesn't act as a lifeguard in the office?
No.
Does she,
No, she used to, but not anymore.
does she have to take care of the pool in any manner? Does she have to do anything outside?
Her over the last year, without going into too much detail, she was a lifeguard. She performed those duties, which explains her rate of pay. But then those things changed, to where she was taken to just being the swim instructor for this program.
We need to move this to a different meeting.
Well,
Does
do
she
we want to
also
continue her as an employee and just continue to have the swim team as it is? Do we want to make it an 80-20? That's what this question is. Do we want to make the swim team an 80-20 similar to the other programs? If it's, this isn't so just.
I look
Have we
at that
approached
in a different
either of
way.
these two to find out if they would be even willing to take that?
I think Hamilton is, but I don't think the swim coach would be.
Okay.
I look at this differently, because this is a service that we provide, it, the association provides.
For a handful of
Whereas
children.
this is a service that an outside individual supplies or provides. Does she also do swim lessons? Does she not do swim
During the
lessons?
summer, I believe she
In the
does.
summer? So I don't think that's probably, the income from that is probably.
No, well, that's a
not-
separate, that would be a separate program, you know, your swim lessons would be separate than the.
No, but we're looking at her annual salary. We're looking at her personal services for a year. So if the income from swimming lessons should be,
Well, that's a, from my understanding, that's a separate program that's seasonal, so then if she says the swim class is from, I don't know, 10 to 2 in the afternoon, in the morning, in the afternoon, then she's paid accordingly for that time, which is separate than the swim, because this is regular, they meet, you know, set time.
this is only for this?
This is only for the swim team, and the other is.
How
for the
many
seasonal.
people are on the swim team?
Oh, you know, I had that. The previous board, she said it could make more if it were open up to non-members, but it's not ever been, or I think it was at one time, and then they closed it only to members. But she did state if it were, I want to say 11, but I'll have to check on that. But she did state that if it was open to non-members,
So where do they compete?
I'm not sure. Throughout the area, I imagine.
Well, there can't be enough people, enough kids on the swim team for us to expect the members, those parents of those kids, to offset a $6,342 deficit for an employee's salary.
Well, do you want to deal with just Hamilton? I would at least like to make a motion to rescind the board setting Hamilton's fees to allow her to set the fee
Go to an
I'm good
and
with that.
to have her, okay, so I make a motion to have Han Hamilton go to an 80-20 split with her setting her fees.
And to move that to Thursday? Or you want to vote that
I need a second.
I second that.
And now make a motion to move that to Thursday.
I'll say.
All in favor?
Aye.
I think it's the initial
Now, back to
motion.
these. I think these need to be considered.
Okay. So then, for the swim team,
I think we need to look at this a little bit more.
so then, the swim team and the youth program, no action right now. Okay.
No action, but
I'm not making money, it needs to go away.
yeah, but we need to look at that.
Yeah.
See if it can be restructured or if they basically needs to
Yeah.
be restructured.
This is not enough information.
Yeah, it doesn't tell me.
Well, at least you got one of them. We'll work on the others. We got one of them.
Okay.
We'll work on the others. Okay. The next item is the Holley by the Sea repealing the residential usage policy. In order to discuss this, I make a motion to rescind the resident usage policy for common areas and recreational facilities that was put in place April 20th, 2015.
That's second.
The reason for this is we've had issues come up. Now, I understand before anybody gets their hair on the back of their neck standing up, I understand the reason that this was put in place. Our covenants are not consistent with regards to renters and homeowners. First and foremost, there is a disparity there when it comes to usage policy. The covenants do not take into account adult children with disabilities who live with their parents over the age of 25. I believe children can use the facility up to 24 or 25. You know, it doesn't account for blended families, extended families, non-traditional families, however you want to word it, you know. So, but that is a covenants issue that needs to be addressed, and hopefully we can work toward that. So previous boards have given variances, you know, people will come and request a variance to the usage policy, the board will look at it and grant it or not grant it. So in an attempt to address some of the issues, the previous board created this policy. So while I understand it was well intended, a problem that has arisen is the verbiage within this usage policy that states, this resident usage policy is for individuals who reside in Holley by the Sea, who do not possess an easement of enjoyment to use the Holley by the Sea common areas and recreational facilities as set forth in the Declaration of Protected Property Rights and Restrictions of Holley by the Sea. The problem with this is there are lot owners who own property in Holley by the Sea, but they don't live in Holley by the Sea. So according to this, they can't use the rec center. They can't use the facility. But in accordance with our covenants, because they pay the assessment and they own property, they can use the facility. So this language has created, and we've received emails with, you know, we can't let you use the facility because of this policy, but yet they're a lot owner. You know, so while they don't have a home on their lot, they still pay their assessment and therefore they are allowed to use the facility. So that is the reason behind wanting to rescind this.
Well, the number one reason is you can't create usage where usage does not exist in the covenants. And you can't usurp the covenants with policy. So just by that fact alone, it needs to go away.
Yes,
What you said just counteracts what I was going to say, but,
I'm sorry.
yeah, so knock it off. No, what I was going to say is, I agree with affecting the covenants, you know, that something needs to be done within the covenants to address the situation. For an interim situation, to keep you all from going back to going nutso with variances, why couldn't that policy be amended to include lot owners?
Technically, the variances are not, you're not able to give a variance for that. The covenants do not allow for variances in that instance. It's only for an architectural variance, and this is not an architectural issue.
Okay, so what you're saying is if this goes away,
It goes away.
all these people can again not use the facility.
Correct, until we change the covenants.
And what are we talking about, 2 years on that?
Well, we're fixing to, first part of the year, go out with to try and lower the threshold for the covenants, to make it easier to try and get some of this stuff passed.
Okay.
So
I
it's
just-
unfortunate, but we're bound by the covenants.
So, I don't know, it just seems so unfair to have, like, your mother-in-law moves in with you or something like that, and she's living in the house, and, you know, she helps them pay for their mortgage, and she's, you know, whatever. So what do we talk, okay, put your name on the mortgage, you know, that, you hate to make them.
Even that's not, that wouldn't fix the problem.
They would have to be on the deed.
No, that, even being on the deed, only one person on the deed has usage rights. And then under that person,
Your spouse.
their spouse and minor children fall. So you can't have two people on the deed and both have usage rights.
So you have a couple that lives together,
Yes.
That's it.
and one of them can use the facilities, the other can't.
That's correct.
And that's the reason why these covenants need to be changed, but this entire thing, as he said, diametrically opposes the covenants. And so in order to fix the issue and to bring it up to 2015, we need to change the covenants, which is, as he said, we're working on, you know, approving an amendment to lower the threshold so that we can get this done.
When's the last time we changed the covenant?
1999?
Because it's 2/3 requirement.
I know.
Too hard.
I know it is.
Yeah,
and
it's-
it's, you know, because people don't vote.
Yeah.
Well, I think this would be an issue. I think if we're able to get the threshold lowered, I think this is an issue that would definitely be discussed first, because it is one. You know, I mean, they were written in 1972. They need to be updated.
How much of a vote does it take to get the threshold?
2/3.
Now it's 50%,
51%.
51%. Yeah.
This is a catch-22.
Well, we are, well, the next item, it discusses the threshold and amendment. Yes, ma'am?
Oh, okay, so the next item will, because I'm already in that situation, that my father's come to live with me, we use the facility 5 days a week. So, can't we just amend that until the covenants get revised?
What this has done is totally,
That's
this,
illegal then?
yes, because what this has done is totally usurp the covenants and saying that this policy is in place, which contradicts the covenants. It's almost like black and white. And again, I understand why, because, you know, the definition of a family, you know, a husband, wife, 2.3 kids or whatever it is not what it is today. You do have your elderly coming home. You do have, you know, your couples, you know, 2 women, 2 men, man, woman, whatever the case may be. You have, you know, in-laws coming in and living, you know, blended, extended families. You have children with disabilities who live with their parents. So there are so many circumstances. So really, in my opinion, it shouldn't be tied to the definition of a family so much as just how many per home.
Yes.
You know, but this.
And I don't think it should be an age, so when we do this, let's not put an age on it, so if you have young children. Okay.
Give us your name, ma'am.
Francie Wilson, 1894 Commodore.
So what was done prior?
She would have had to come because her father came to live with her. She would have had what was prior practices. She would have requested a hardship variance because her father does not fall under the definitions of family for the covenants to have usage rights. Now, the argument is, does the board have the authority to grant usage rights variance? There's two camps of thought. One is no, the covenants only allow us architectural variances to grant, and the other is yes, we can grant, depending on how the bylaws are read. So that would have been her situation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's just, if we've done it in the past, and we're a private organization, so if we do something against the covenant, then as a board, if you do something that's against the covenant and someone doesn't like it, then ultimately to get that change, they probably have to sue, right? So obviously, with all this that we've done in the past, no one has said anything. We passed this residential use, now we unintentionally affected a portion of our populace who now is speaking up and saying something. So we're changing it. So if our full intent is to get to a place where we better define the family, and there's no one out there saying, don't do it, by golly, you're violating the covenants, because we're a private organization and we all understand that we have to change what exists. So let's just normally go forth and do what we've done in the past, either through a variance or amending this residential use policy so that everyone can still use the facility as is, but still go and pursue changing this, the covenants.
And then all it takes is one person out of 4,711 to turn out and say, okay, I'm gonna sue you for it.
So we'd like.
Well, then we have to deal with that, but no one has up to this point. But you're gonna affect an awful lot of people.
I understand this is an emotional issue because we're dealing with who can use the facility, but for me, personally, it's, people want us to enforce the covenants when they want us to, but then don't want us to enforce the covenants when they don't. This is one of those issues where people don't want us to enforce the covenants, but yet if you've got somebody with 2 boats in their drive and their grass is overgrown, or you know, something that clearly violates the covenants, then they want us to enforce the covenants. So for me, it's, we either have a standard and apply it across the board and then work toward changing the governing documents, or we don't. Because that means any board can come in and say, well, I don't like the boat policy, and we know that that's created a whole lot of discontent within the community. So we'll create a policy to allow 2 boats per drive, regardless of what the covenants say.
And I understand that argument, and it's a valid argument. But there is, I assume, no appetite on the board or on any members, as far as the majority, to change that particular rule.
There is. There's a huge appetite.
But there's
to
never been any
change
variance that's
the
been issued
parking.
for that?
There has been, and that's the
those
point, you know,
things-
that's the thing. There have been boards who have, just because they can't change the covenants, or they issue a variance, or they grandfather it in, and, you know, so for me, either we enforce it or we don't. So for people, it's whether the covenants are enforced, based on my experience, depends on if it affects them personally. For you, the boat policy, you probably don't care, because you don't have a boat, you may never have a boat, it doesn't matter to you. This affects you. For someone who has a boat, but only has a husband and wife, the usage policy doesn't affect them. So they probably don't care if your father can't use the facility, or you got a blended family, but that boat policy, that affects them. You know, so it really just depends on what area it is, and how it affects somebody. And the covenants affect everyone. You know, it does affect people's lives on different levels. And so that's why it's so important to, number one, you know, get the threshold down to where we can amend the covenants so that they're up to date, and that it clarifies the language and provides a clean document so that people know what to expect, you know, without the ability to just change it, you know, on a whim.
Yeah, but I always found that it's too easy to not use judgment when it comes to some of these things. And I completely understand your argument, I do. But it's not just going to be us that's going to be affected. It is a very large number of individuals.
Well, let me
that are
ask
going
you
to be
this
affected
then,
by this.
because if you weren't affected by this policy, that whether we rescind it or keep it or whatever, would you, you might have to think like your average person, would your average person be inclined to vote to lower the threshold so that we can amend it if nothing affects them? Now that this affects you.
And that is exactly
now
why
that
we
this
had such a hard
affects
time amending.
you, I can, now, if we rescind this tonight, you're gonna have to go home and say, you know, Dad, we can't use the facility. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that when this amendment to lower the threshold so that we can modernize the covenants come out, you will probably be more inclined to not only support it, but to talk to your neighbor, to talk to your neighbor's neighbor, to discuss with people to get this changed so that we can modernize the usage, so that it is reflective of today. Where if it doesn't affect you, then maybe you go, well, it doesn't really matter, you know, I don't care, you know, and you won't. So that's part of it, is if we enforce the covenants, as hard as that is, because I understand it affects people's lives, then people will be more inclined to go, we need to do something here, because now it's personal. And most people don't act unless it's.
And I guess with that.
This is personal. Not cutting your grass, parking your boat in the driveway is one thing. This is really affecting people's lives.
Yeah.
And I am totally opposed to using this as leverage to try to get the covenants changed.
Oh, I misspoke. I'm not wanting to use this as leverage. What I'm saying is this is an example. No, I don't think I said use this as leverage. I don't think that ever. I don't think that's.
I'm not offended. I'm not offended.
That is not.
I've listened to Yvonne for quite a long time.
Okay, let me just restate it then, okay? So nobody's pissed off at me and throwing eggs, all right? This was just an example of when the covenants affect somebody personally. They will be more inclined to act to change them. You know, and for many people, this will affect them. For many people, it's the boats. I'm not saying use this as leverage, and I did not, and I don't care what anybody thinks, I did not in any way, shape, or form put this on the agenda tonight to use as leverage. This was on the agenda tonight because we have received emails from people who own lots who, based on this policy, cannot use the rec center when, according to the covenants, they can. That is why it's on the agenda.
So we take that lot part out of it. Now that,
That's what
I
I
don't
That's
buy.
what I asked you to do. Thank you.
But I'm not going to be accused of something that I didn't do.
Well, you didn't, if
I'm not accusing
you
you of
say
anything. I will
it
ask you
becomes
not.
personal and then you vote to change it, how is that any different than using it for leverage?
I'm not using it for leverage, it was just an example.
You didn't
Okay,
use
well,
it
here's an
for
example for you, okay? Let's try another example.
You can
And I don't mean to piss you off.
Whatever.
Okay?
Well, I don't either,
Kevin, do the covenants supersede state or federal law?
No, they do not.
They do not. Okay. But the covenants say that a family is a husband and a wife and their children under 25, right? Is or is not gay marriage legal in Florida?
Yes. Well, actually, I don't think
Actually,
it's
no,
legal,
it's not legal.
but the
The
Supreme
federal
Court, the
court,
state law hasn't caught up with it.
The
Feds
federal
have
court-
ruled.
Federal courts say it
but the
is.
state law has not changed.
I don't care, it's federal law says it is.
There is no federal law to marriage, it's a state issue, the Supreme
But the
Court.
And the Supreme Court has ruled in 39
The
states have
Supreme Court
said.
ruled, but Florida has not amended, it needs to.
The point is, there are definitions that are legal of family that come under federal law that are diametrically opposed to our covenant. Okay, so I agree with the gentleman that says there's got to be a middle ground somewhere. You can't just all of a sudden. Now, I disagree with that policy. I didn't even know that policy existed. And I'm trying to figure out who in the heck enforced it. Who told a homeowner that I found out you don't have a house here, so you can't
Because the
use-"
homeowner contacted the center, or not a homeowner, a lot owner, and they were told, based on this policy by the staff, that a board implemented, because the staff has to carry out the policies that this board implements, that said, and they were told, you can't use the facility because according to this, you're not home, you don't reside in Holley by the Sea.
And I still don't understand.
And I think
why
that's just
that
a
even came up.
misinterpretation of what this form
I think
is.
that's a misinterpretation
Well,
of the
it's
usage
pretty
policy.
clear, I mean, so maybe we just, if you want to change the language, that's fine, but this is pretty clear. This policy is for individuals who live or
I
reside in Holley
applaud
by the
your
Sea.
efforts to change the covenants, but we all know that's gonna take a long time, and you're going, at best, in best case, you won't do it for at least a year. Okay? And you're turning around and you're basically creating, if you think you get an email now, wait till you change the policy again. I would let sleeping dogs lie. Change what you've got there so that the people who are complaining are reassured that their rights have not been taken away from them, and proceed down the road toward changing the covenants as appropriate. Because I think you're gonna create a bigger problem, and personally, it doesn't affect me. I will vote to change the covenants, but it doesn't affect me one way or another. I just think
Basically, we're a public facility in violation of federal handicap laws. Is that what we're saying? Because if we're letting people use the facility that don't have easement of enjoyment, we're a public facility.
debate that
So
forever.
you change it to property owner. Is that simple?
Well, what are we doing? Are we letting grandma use the facility?
Sure. If
But
she's living,
do
if
the
she's
covenants
living
state
with
that
the
grandma can use the
people,
facility? Covenants don't state that.
it's not the Constitution, it's covenant. I mean, seriously, it was written by a builder.
Okay?
I'm sorry, I don't just think it's the be all and the end all.
Well, what keeps the board from meeting in secret? Rules. We have rules, and so we don't do that. We have covenants. They are rules. They keep and operate the facility. So,
And
we
as a
can't let
board,
one
we
slide.
also have a right to set policy.
not
This
in
is a
contradiction,
policy.
not in contradiction to the covenants.
I think one of the things
I
I'm
don't
concerned
buy it.
about is risk aversion. So people talk about someone suing us for one thing or another. And I think there's a responsibility that the board has to look at what's the most risky position and what's the least risky position. And to me, the least risky position is to allow reasonable usage. Reasonable usage is a lot owner that uses it, a grandmother that lives with somebody, a disabled child, not 14 people that live in a rental home, not other things. There should be reasonable accommodations. We know that the covenants are broken, and I agree that they need to be changed out. It won't affect me, but I will vote to change them because I know they're broken too. I think that, I know Yvonne's point, you want to spur people to action. I agree. I think that if people aren't affected by something that's broken, they won't fix it a lot of times. That's the problem with our homeowners association. We got, what, 700 people to vote last time for the board? But just consider the risk aversion. What's the least risky position for us? Now, clearly, that policy's broken.
The least risky position is to follow the covenants.
That policy is broken, but we'll get sued.
Okay, let me ask you this. On this policy, it says no more than 4 residents per household. So let's say I have a home, and my husband and I, along with my son, my 15-year-old, and then my, I don't know, sister, husband dies, God forbid. She's got 4 boys. She moves in with me. That exceeds 4. They're all under the age of 18. But yet, they pay rent, or they help with the cost of the home. They're now part of my family. We're supporting them. But according to this, it's only 4.
Well, I didn't realize it said an arbitrary number of 4.
They
That
just
doesn't-
see-
It was number of bedrooms in the covenants, as I remember.
Yeah, it's a number of
That's just
bedrooms.
it. So now you've got, okay, you want to allow the policy to do this, but we're still gonna go by the covenants for the
Well,
number of bedrooms.
Well, then they
So-
come to you and ask and you say, well, that's a little bit more, I mean, that's 7 people out of one house, that's a little bit excessive. To me, that's a reasonable, that's a little bit
I've
excessive.
sat in these meetings with variance requests for people who have extended families who come and live, and they have asked. And some have been granted and some have not.
Well, I mean, you have to set a benchmark and say, what is reasonable, and
Again, what is reasonable?
That's,
5, 6?
Yeah.
2 people per bedroom, it could be 100 different things that are reasonable, I don't know, but the point is that risk aversion should be one of the goals here, and what is the least, that policy's broken. I mean, the board that enacted that policy, weren't they the ones that got out of here? I remember sitting here and listening to that policy, it's broken. So the policy is broken, fix the policy, then fix the covenants.
Well, they were trying to fix the covenants, and in so doing, they created other problems.
I get it, I understand, I'm just saying, consider the risk aversion, what's the least risky position? That's all I'm saying.
Then why not get Becker and Polyakoff to help us write it where it isn't broken?
This is for others more than me. If we're willing to get so far down in the weeds and nitpick the minutia of every subclause of every section in the covenants and 720, etc., you're gonna find something that someone could probably sue you over. So do you wanna be sued over somebody might take offense to this policy being in some sort of a conflict with the covenants? Or do you wanna get sued for discrimination? Is not trying to establish leverage. It is what it is. Every time you poke a bear with a stick, it's probably gonna irritate you. That's not cause I'm, so I don't think what you did was an attempt at leverage. You're stating an obvious observation. Different people care about different things, and I'm more emotionally enhanced over something that I care about than something I don't care about. It's just the way folks are. I really like chocolate ice cream. Couldn't care less
You
about
like what
vanilla.
kind of ice cream?
Chocolate.
Oh, chocolate. I thought you said shotguns. There's a Ben and Jerry's. All right, let me rescind my motion to rescind this policy.
Why don't we make a new?
I know, but I needed to rescind that one first.
Okay. I'll say.
All in favor?
We don't have to vote on a rescinding of
I
a
know.
motion we didn't vote on.
It's okay,
That's true.
we're all good.
Get it on record. Well, then I will allow some other need to state the motion. What you'd like to.
I would like to make a motion to work with our attorney to reword this particular policy so that it's not, so that it is more inclusive. Because if it's that you have to reside in Holley by the
Is that all the motion?
No.
The rationale, no.
That, okay, just leave it at that. Let us
So
join with our attorney to edit this so that it's a workable policy. How's that?
So your motion is to send this to the attorney for guidance on how to bring it in compliance.
Yes, that'll work.
Well,
No,
No.
no.
bringing it into compliance, you said was clear.
Clear.
The compliance isn't the issue.
Yeah,
You
can-
said
can-
you're bound by the compliance.
Yeah, can we just strike the words, reside in from the policy?
Yeah.
It's just do that and press on.
But I don't really like the no more than 4 residents, because, I mean,
Oh,
even,
okay, I didn't
because
catch that
that,
part.
I mean, let's just say my sister doesn't die, but my husband and I decide to have children, and I end up with quadruplets. God, really. That definitely exceeds the 4. So even with the home, you know, a husband and wife, if they have more than 2 children, for this policy, they're excluded,
Strike
so.
both restrictions.
So,
Press.
That restricts me.
that restricts you, so Rob's motion is to send this to the attorney for guidance.
I just wanted to tell you.
We need a second.
I was the first member, and I don't have any vested interest in this. I have one husband.
Now, hang on a second. Can I get, no, please stay. Can I get a second on the motion?
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
No, that was it. I wanted you all to know, because I was the first one that said anything about it. It doesn't apply to me.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it matters. If it
Well, I think
applies
it applies to
to everyone. I think
everybody.
it's
The only
important that
people that
everybody.
cared were the ones that it
Yeah.
applied to, and it doesn't apply to me, but I just want to think it is so eminently unfair.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree that the covenants are different.
See, I think where y'all are getting confused is this is the resident usage policy. If you don't live here, you don't fall under the word resident. You're a non-resident. And the usage policy is the covenants. So if you don't live here, you can still use the facility. You can still bring your kids. You can still, you know, do as you normally do. But this is only giving usage to those who live here who don't normally have usage under our covenants. That's the only thing this policy does. It's not a policy that rewriting the covenants. This is just saying, if you live here, these rules apply separately.
Well, then maybe it doesn't need fixing.
It needs to go away.
But then if it goes away,
Well, if it
that
doesn't
same
make any
logic,
difference, like I said,
then,
you can go away.
then if it's going away though, then using the logic of the covenants, you're restricting those who live here.
And not.
Well, if you don't live here, you're bound, you're not a renter at that point if you don't live here. You own a piece of property.
But I'm saying, like, her mother, her father,
Okay.
living with her right now, would we consider him a resident?
No. I mean, under this policy, they're given usage, but under the covenants, they are not a husband, wife,
that's what we're
or
saying.
under federal
That's-
law, a spouse, you know, a married person, and their children under 25. They don't fall under that category, so no, they wouldn't have
It's a
use.
state law.
When we came down here looking for a house in January of 14, that policy was not into effect. And we came within that close of buying a home, and we found out about this. I came over here and talked numerous times to the recreation center, because her dad is 88, uses the gym every day, probably why he's still alive at this point. Not to make it sound too emotional, but it's quite true. So we rented, because right over here across the street, because as a renter, we had 4 bedrooms, all 4, I have an adult daughter that's 29 that also lives at home, all 4 of us could use the facility. When I came back from my overseas assignment, I was gone for a year, I came back in R&R, and this policy was in effect. And we were like, hallelujah. We can use the facility, because that's what kept us from buying, because he has to be able to use the gym. That's just part of his lifestyle. So under that policy, then we purchased. And now that will be taken away from us if that's rescinded. So I know it's anecdotal, it's just one person, but it's a true to life experience of what exactly happened based on the covenants and that policy. Thank you.
send it, Rod, would we send it to the attorney seeking advice on how to best word or amend?
Now, if Kevin's right, which I agree probably is, as far as the usage, you just have to be property owner. Doesn't matter whether you live here or not. And this is designed for those who do live here. Perhaps, again, it's not broken.
Because some of the problems that had arisen was somebody their house had burned down here, and they were living in another town, they were living in Fort Walton. But they wanted their father to be able to use the facility. Now technically, they weren't living here, so this policy didn't apply to them, and they were told no. And that's where some of the confusion came about, I think, with the board, as far as, because of that discussion about whether or not they could use the facility.
Yeah, I don't see making a drastic move because of the issue. I mean, there's no reason that we couldn't have sat down as a board and said, you still own the house burned down. Were you able to live in it? That person would be, by this policy, and able to use the facility. I wouldn't have issue with saying that, personally.
Yeah, but you use common sense instead of the letter of.
I couldn't hear you.
Said use common
Oh, I
sense.
said you were using common sense instead of following the letter of the covenant.
Like the intent.
All right, so in order to move on, I appreciate everybody's comments, and I think it's important to stress that we can have a lively conversation and still be respectful, and so I appreciate everybody's doing that. So the motion was to send to the attorney. Do we want to move, the motion would have to.
Do we need to do that? I never said that much, I'm sorry. It is not rescinded.
Sorry, you rescinding your
Unless
motion?
you think it needs editing. I would need to read it in a little more detail. So why don't we just
Move it to-
postpone?
Can we move it until Thursday for discussion on Thursday? Or do we have to move it for a whole other month? To
No.
revisit it?
Yeah, let's just move the discussion further. Till Thursday.
All right, so make a motion to move the discussion portion to Thursday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't have a clue what our motion is. That motion
The
rescinded,
final
motion
motion,
rescinded.
the final motion.
I run out of room.
I don't know.
The final motion is to move the discussion of this policy to Thursday.
All right, so we're moving for discussion only. And who made this motion? Rod?
Did I? I don't know.
I did. I made the motion.
I start trying to write this stuff and y'all keep stuttering and it just confuses me.
I made the motion.
We're just keeping you quiet now.
All right, so who
I'm
seconded
sorry.
it? Yvonne did it and you seconded it. All right, and we're just moving to Thursday for discussion.
All right, on to the review of the covenant committee threshold and letters to members. In order to discuss this, I make a motion to approve the number and letter only, not the proxy. Approve the number and letter only.
I second that.
And number what? I'll say that again.
The number and the letter only,
Only.
not the proxy.
Oh, okay.
So it was second. So John was part of this committee to come up with a number that we, in order to amend the constitution. Of course, this would take the 51% to bring the amendment number down. But their committee spent a lot of time in creating a number that would be reachable without too easily reached as to allow covenants that can just be changed on emotional whim. And they looked at statistical data, like when they had a number, if they increased it or lowered it by a certain percent, would it change the outcome of the election? They did a lot of research into this, and
Okay, do we have a second on that?
no, we did.
That was you.
So if the proxy is approved, then the number would go, you would replace subparagraph A with the following, that not less than 2/3 supermajority of the entire standing of the board of directors, and by not less than 2/3 of a minimum 25% voting response from the entire voting interest of the membership. So make sure I explain this right. So what that means is 25% of the voting membership would have to vote. And of that 25%, 2/3 could then, if approved, then the amendment would go forward. Okay? Did I say that right? Okay. So what we are approving, and we will approve the proxy in January, is we are approving the committee's recommendation for that number, so 2/3, so a supermajority, so 4 out of 5 of the board members would have to approve the amendment, or proposed amendment. And then, if approved, 2/3 of 25% of the entire voting membership would have to approve the change. Okay, that's what we're approving tonight, is just that number and the letter that would accompany the proxy. Okay, so the proxy would be approved in January to be mailed out.
Can I clarify?
Yes.
Just on the point you just said, I thought I heard you said of the voting membership, it's of the voting response.
Let's see.
It
25%.
requires a 25% response, is the answer to your question.
Yeah, 25%.
From the entire voting interest,
Okay.
And 2/3 of those that
and
respond.
2/3 of those. So 25% of the entire voting interest, of 25% of 4711,
And then 2/3 of that?
and then 2/3 of that,
Okay.
yes.
I mean, it's still very difficult considering the number of responses.
Now, if this proxy goes out, this would still require the 51%. So which is, why we would need to get some door-to-door action going on. So the letter, there were two, the board drafted, not the board, but the committee presented a letter. I had made some edits, Rod had made some edits, so I just took our, edits, if you will, and just combined them into one document. Did everybody get the final revised? Does everybody want me to read it out loud? Okay. So let me go see what the letter would read, dear fellow Holley by the Sea property owners, the Holley by the Sea Board of Directors and Covenants Committee are working hard to find ways to protect all Holley by the Sea property values. The first step is to better align the Holley by the Sea covenants and bylaws amendment process to a more reasonable and reachable expectation. In 2010, a previous Holley by the Sea board made this attempt. Of the Holley by the Sea voting members, 89% voted in favor, but that amendment did not pass due to the present unrealistic amendment provision of the required 51% of the entire voting membership voting in favor of the change. Today, we urge you to approve the enclosed amendment and return the proxy form. Your Holley by the Sea Covenants and Bylaws Committee and your Board of Directors unanimously recommend this amendment. We need every property owner to assist us by completing the enclosed proxy and returning it as soon as possible. Once the amendment is approved by 51% of the membership, we can work to determine what changes should be offered for your vote. Some examples of topics that could then be presented for your consideration include: limit the amount of percentage of annual assessment increases, clearly define who can use our facilities and common areas, propose changes to ensure that our HOA is in compliance with federal and Florida statutes, thus possibly reducing liability and cost, make the process to recall board of directors more reasonable for members. And then it states the Covenants Committee, who were Dave Hawkins, Thomas Beckman, Patrick Ward, Pete Peterson, and Joe Campbell. Board of Directors, Yvonne Harper, Kevin Lanier, Rod Danner, Skip, and Don Mullen, Deanne, Sean Parker. There was a typo in there. I didn't read. Yeah, in reduce. Yeah, I didn't read the typo. So that is what the letter would state. So that is what we would be approving today. So any discussion? All right, make a motion to move this to Thursday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the next item is to approve the committee chair for the ACBR.
That's this one's problem right here. He's the one that came up with that.
Violation, am I saying it right?
The Architectural Control Violation Review Committee.
You're missing a C then.
That one.
What?
We already have an architectural.
Well, no.
This is the committee
This
to
is the
review,
committee.
this is the finding committee.
This is the one that we voted on with the members, but what they're doing now is we're appointing.
Developing a procedure.
Well, yeah, but what we're doing is,
Seating someone.
we're putting Patricia Hoag as the chair.
Does that need us to decide, or we can
No,
the
that's it.
committee?
They should
Well,
do
the
that.
board on a committee, the board approves the chairperson, and then everybody else.
Okay, then I make a
thought the
motion
committee
to,
elected their own.
yeah, I did too.
Then the board approves.
still have to
it.
approve.
Okay.
Okay.
It's-
But I make a motion to approve Patricia Hoog as the committee chair for the ACBR.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the next one is to appoint the following members to the Permanent Pool Enclosure Committee. Kevin Green, Bill Stewart, Christopher Hicks, Joe Hattlewood.
And Ed has agreed in the interim to sort of be the ad hoc chairman until they can get together and elect their own chairman to move forward on this. Did you make a motion? I'd like to move to appoint Kevin Green, Bill Stewart, Christopher Hicks, and John Hadley to the Pool Enclosure
I
Committee.
just need a USB thing.
That's
Get
adding
you
one to
Okay.
the existing.
Yes, add the
And did you want to specify one of those as the chair yet, or just wait till the next meeting?
Ed, who is already on the committee, has agreed to be kind of ad hoc chairman.
Until the
Are you
committee
shaking your
elects
head
among
back there?
itself the person they want to be the chair.
Right, until they're
The
elected.
interim chair until the committee.
And that'll be presented to the board for approval.
Yes, ma'am.
This is my last time. But this is really the reason I came tonight. All these other things just popped up. Okay. I, did not know there was a meeting Sunday night, and I've been out of town, and I watched emails, and I didn't get a blast on the movie Sunday night, so that's why there's more things going on before. But I have a very vested interest, personal interest, I'll be honest, in the pool. And is the idea behind this structure,
Nobody can hear you out here.
my husband would never believe that.
Tell me to keep behind.
There's no way. Okay, could you tell me if the, structure that you're talking about is the same structure that we looked at, or was looked at back in, what was it, 11? I mean, the idea of putting
Yes,
up
and
a
they'll be
permanent.
Right,
yes, and they'll be
same
reviewing
concept,
that.
same idea. Of course,
Okay.
many things have changed since then.
Okay, so, but does that have anything to do with whether or not we have a dome?
No.
Not at this
Well,
The meeting Sunday
not
was
now.
for us to approve a contractor to put the dome up this year. We found a contractor. So that was, the meeting was, once we got the information, we threw a meeting out there as quickly as notice would allow us. And so that they would have all week to try and get it lined up.
Okay, okay, so we are gonna have the pool dome erected.
Provided that it is in shape that we can put it up.
Okay, and I honestly see no reasonable reason that it shouldn't be, because I just don't, I think it would be fine.
We hope.
We certainly do, paying all that money for it. But I'm glad to hear that that's going to happen, and I do think it makes sense to reconsider a permanent structure.
Technology and things like that have changed in the 4 years. We're gonna look at that other material to see what they have, what folks looked at before, because that's a good ground footing to start with.
Well, yeah, I would think
But then at the same time, we know that things have changed since then, you know, in the technology and whatever stuff.
Can you tell me why that we had to have a person this time put it up that was licensed and we never had in the past? I guess I didn't understand. I got bits and pieces.
Prior, Jackie Goebel was the maintenance manager, and she had been instructed by the company who had come in and who we purchased it from and had it erected, so she had that institutional knowledge. She was let go, so she wasn't here to do that. And she declined, given the liability issue, and that was something that the board completely understood and accepted, that she didn't want to assume that, you know, and us paying her to put it up.
She would have had more liability
Well,
than she would have had as an employee.
Yes, because the insurance would have covered her as an employee. Yes.
Okay.
And so that was something that we understood. And so we moved forward and found this company who can now come in and they have the insurance and all that.
Well, we need a volunteer to come over here and scrub any mold we got on that by being put away wrong. I would be glad to volunteer, but I need the pool.
All right, we'll let you know, because we won't, until it comes out.
Don't let
Thank
you
you.
know.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think for the sake of clarification, my intention or my impression of this committee is not to go and make a suggestion as to an enclosure facility to be purchased. It is to review what is available on the market, what changes have been made in the past 4 to 5 years, because at some point, a decision will have to be made as to whether or not we want to replace the current style of dome with another enclosure of that type, or do we want to move to a more permanent and differently maintained type enclosure?
Correct.
So if we can gather facts, present the facts, and then come up with a long-range plan, a better decision can be made, and that's my objective for being on this committee.
And that is the objective of the committee.
How cool is that?
It's your chairing. So we need to
I
make
love
a
it when
motion.
I'm playing down
So
there.
the motion was to, all right, so the motion were to have these members, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that concludes the agenda items, now open forum. Oh, there will be an item, my apologies, there will be an item on the agenda on Thursday. We did not have it on tonight's agenda only because Holley Navarro Water System was not here. They will be presenting, they sent preliminary plans via email to us. They're going to present a plan to help mitigate the flooding on the north side of 98 where the 2 ponds are by using the hole in the ground that we have over here. So to include the permitting and all that, so they have their budget meeting tonight, so they were planning on coming tonight to answer any questions. So they couldn't make it due to conflict of meetings, so they will be here Thursday. So on Thursday, we will discuss and vote on that item. So, okay, open forum?
I know Jackie by the name of Jackie. Can you not hire her to do this?
We reached out to her and she declined, just given the liability issues.
Can you not hire her to work for you for a short-term employment?
We offered that and she declined. Yeah. But we have someone who's coming in.
When is that? You know when?
She's getting everything lined up with them now, so hopefully as soon as possible, within the next week or 2.
My other question is, when you don't have the dome on there and you're heating it, that's got to be tremendously expensive.
It does. It costs a lot of money to heat that pool, whether it's enclosed or not.
Exactly.
It definitely doesn't help when it's not enclosed. Any other items? All right. It is 8:16. I make a motion to adjourn.